I just want to begin by explaining my story of how I left Christianity and how this made me basically lose my belief in an afterlife. So, after renouncing Christianity, I, lost a bunch of beliefs. Not just a belief in an afterlife, but a belief in a God, in sin, and all other sorts of ideas. But I think a belief in an afterlife was one of the things that was operating as a coping mechanism without me knowing it. And I think it does that regardless of how we label it. So, for instance, if, a loved one dies, sometimes we comfort ourselves if we're a Christian by saying, well, they went to heaven because they're saved. And sometimes that, person could have gone to hell, unfortunately, or at least you think so. And this can be very difficult. But, with heaven on the horizon, it can be very, very comforting to think about that, to think about the fact that death might not actually be this ultimate final thing, but this thing that just is a transitionary period between this life and the next one. And it can seem a bit doomsday or nihilistic to think that when we die, everything just ends. And this is how I perceived death when I was a Christian. But eventually, when I became atheist, I realized that death really wasn't, this thing that was a transition. It was something that was the end, and that was it. And at first, this made me feel as if my entire world fell apart, basically. I felt like nothing really mattered because it would all end anyways. And I think one of the first things that helped me embrace mortality and start flourishing a bit more is beginning to understand that the religious view of death was very flawed. So, Christianity basically claims that religion or death is the wages of sin. So, the reason we all die and we are doomed to hell by default is because we have this innate sin. But I don't really think this is the case, and this is kind of the first step towards more fully embracing your own mortality. And this is how I embraced it. This isn't to say that I'm all correct. And, we all approach death a little bit differently. I'm just saying this is basically what I have found to be the most important first step and has really helped me out in flourishing more in life. So I want to preface what I'm about to say with that. But I really do think, from my own experience, that challenging the religious view of death, and that doesn't just include traditionally religious views, it can also involve challenging religious-esque views, such as this idea that technology can somehow make us immortal. For example, there's this YouTuber and multimillionaire named Brian Johnson who has this whole movement, this whole philosophy, as he calls it, called Don't Die. And basically that is what you think it's about. It's about not dying through the use of technology and AI, apparently. But besides the details of that situation, the essence of his philosophy is that, you can somehow achieve immortality. And for somebody like me who was religious, I actually embraced that philosophy after leaving Christianity because it was very familiar to me, this idea that I can somehow be immortal. The afterlife kind of served that function. But I think by questioning this idea that you really can be immortal, whether by believing in God or by using technology, there still is this use of those things as a way to avoid the fact that you are going to die, and that dying is scary. Because when you die, you no longer have this life, and you don't have any of the good things that come with it, all your friends, all of the fun work you like to do, your hobbies. And death seems like a final removal from all of these values. And that is why I think it is scary. Yet, it is important to take death into account as a fact, because I think it can lead to all sorts of issues. So, the reason why you should challenge death is because if you do, then you can become more grounded in what death actually is. And let me get into part 2 of this. This idea that death is something different from what a lot of people say it is. I do think that death is just this ultimate disintegration of your mind and body, and it's completely impersonal. There's no God saying that death is this thing that is the wage of death, of sin or wrongdoing. It's really just an inevitability. Your body decays over time. And yes, you could use technology to live longer, and there's some promising technologies out there that promise to do that. But we shouldn't kid ourselves that death is this thing that is ultimately and inevitably going to come. Because if we don't, then we'll have a flawed calculation in how we should live our limited life. And I think this is kind of the core idea here is that by embracing death, you can take into full account how limited your life is. And this creates a healthy sense of urgency, I think. I felt like when I was a Christian and I had this afterlife on the horizon, or that when I had this Brian Johnson technology promise on the horizon, then I could delay doing the things that I felt like I should be doing. Those things that were important to me, like creating videos like this, or speaking with loved ones, having hard conversations. I almost felt like I could put those things off indefinitely because my life was indefinite. And I think realizing that death is this thing that is ultimate and final gives you this perspective you need to see that each second you spend is something that you're spending. And it's something that you can never get back. Which at first is scary, but once you accept this fact, and as I did, it really did help me come to grips with how much I was wasting my time. And so I could begin to start spending it better. But I want to get into part 3 of this because I think I've already gone through these first 2 points. Point 1 is you need to challenge your religious view of death. And that's what I ended up doing. And that was scary and difficult, but it helped me realize and ground myself in a new view of death. This idea that it is this ultimate thing that, ends our life, but it also reframes each second that you're spending as even more valuable. And that way it creates this healthy sense of urgency that drives you to do the things that are really important to you instead of putting them off indefinitely because there's a safety net for you at the end of the day. But it can be difficult to internalize this. On some level, we can all consciously know, okay, this makes some sense. But to integrate this into our emotions, for example, is a whole nother story. I think that in order for anybody to take any conclusion they reach intellectually and actually act on it and have that become a consistent part of their identity, you need to have an emotional attachment to it. So something that really helped me do this was going through this visualization practice or this imagination practice in which I would do something like think about how my death was upcoming, which seems a little morbid, but I promise it actually does help. Because when you imagine, well, I'm going to die one day, and you start looking at the things you're doing now, you start to realize, man, I'm wasting all this time stressing out about what my mother thinks about me or what these people that I don't even know think about me and all other sorts of things. And once you begin to contemplate your own death and internalize how bad it feels to waste time by visualizing how much of a waste of time it is, you begin to basically fear missing out on spending your time wisely. And this kind of flips FOMO, fear of missing out, on its head. And I think a lot of people are driven by FOMO in unhealthy ways. But I think this is a way to reframe your FOMO so that you fear missing out on the good things. Of course, you don't want to just be primarily motivated by fear. We all want to feel like we're motivated to do something because it matters to us and that it's something that feels good when we go after it. And I think this reminds me of this quote from Ayn Rand in Atlas Shrugged. And she basically says something along the lines of, your fear of death is not a love for life. And I think there's some truth in this, that just because you fear death doesn't mean you're living life. You can just be paranoid all the time about dying and wrap yourself in bubble wrapper, basically, and never actually do the things that matter. Never do the things that are risky, that actually add spice to life. And I think in order to fully embrace your mortality and flourish more in your life, you need to basically not just fear missing out on doing the right things, but see that doing the right things are enjoyable and are a part of life and add to it. And this can only come with understanding that you're going to die one day. And so it might seem morbid, but by understanding that your time is limited, you can actually fully focus on and be present with what is here now, because it is fleeting. And you only have this one opportunity to catch it. And again, you can see there's that healthy sense of urgency there. And so hopefully this video kind of encapsulates some of my thoughts on this. I am nowhere near being finished on thinking on this subject. I'm probably making some errors along the way when I'm making this video. But nonetheless, I think this is a very vital and important topic to talk about, because we sometimes get busy in life and don't think about this most fundamental thing at play, life and death. And if we can become more conscious about it, we can begin to spend our time better and enjoy life even more. So hopefully this video helps you, and if it did, or you at least like my approach to this video, trying to just explain these ideas and go about finding how to connect these deep thoughts to, practical outcomes, drop a subscription, leave a like, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from all of you, and even your objections, because I want to improve how I'm creating these videos and my thoughts on the subject, and the only way I can do that is with your guys' help. So thank you so much for watching.